Okay, here we go. And like I said, I may have to take my face off of here if I don't have good signal. Okay, here we go. As a preliminary matter, the ACNVT is meeting. Peter Halley is the chair. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Everybody just state your name.
Gary Beller.
John Green.
Your Con.
Bill Gardner.
Bill Sherman, I heard you, and Peter Halley. So
Kathy Baird.
as a matter of record, we have a quorum.
Okay. We don't have any anticipated speakers. Good morning. The open meeting of the ACNBT is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, ACNBT is convening by video conference via Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that the meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Ground rules. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. Peter Halley will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. After members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote.
Thank you. So we'll proceed through. First, I've noted we have a quorum present. Let's vote on the agenda. Everyone in favor of the agenda? First, second. Yeah, okay. Unanimous. The minutes of the last meeting, motion for approval or any comments on them? Second. Can I second? Yeah. All in favor signify by raising their right hand. Everybody's right hand is up. Thank you. Yeah. Any hand will do, actually. Yeah. Okay. So then we're down to today's meeting. As Kathy noted, we don't have any speakers, but in actuality, we have speakers. This meeting is primarily about the STROG process that is going on, and I thought it would be helpful for us to get together with our representatives, Peter and Bill, and have them comment on the process, have them seek whatever advice they need from the rest of us to participate in the next meeting. I note there is an agenda for next meeting, and I don't know, is that up on the STROG website yet?
I think it is.
Yeah,
Yes.
so anybody so just a one-page agenda. And then I think there are minutes of the last meeting, which are rather extensive. And lastly, is the legal advice up on the website as well?
Yes.
I think so.
Yeah, and I commend all this to you. We would have, included in our own packages today, but I think they sort of published that either the day we provided notice or the day after. Because I think in the future, as we have these strong focused meetings, we will be discussing what has been going on there and hopefully having some kind of enriching discussion, which will help Peter and Bill in this process. So with that said, Peter and Bill, do you want to start out with basically telling us where you think we are and where it needs to go, and what sort of backing or advice do you need from the rest of us, or if not need, at least you'd find comforting?
Sure. I'm happy to start. I mean, and you know, Kathy, of course, has been attending, and she can as well as Bill, and she can, both of them can fill in the blanks here. I think the overall comment I would make is this is a slow and painful process. There is a lot of how should I say, gum smacking going on here, and not a lot of forward movement. There is we literally have not. I mean, it started with I had suggested that, and among others, that we define the problem. That did not seem to take any interest. They wanted to talk about policy and process, and we've been spending all this time on process, to tell you the truth. Very frustrating, I find it. Finally, I think the most important progress we finally made was a meeting with town council, and that I do commend, as Peter just said, the opinion, or I should say not formal opinion, but the responses to questions that are now in writing that are posted. I have not had a chance to study it closely. I did attend it, so I heard it, or most of it, but I need to study it more closely. It is from my perspective, and I think our perspective. I mean, the one issue that we went into this meeting with, this process with, was that non-voting taxpayers should be treated the same as voting taxpayers. That position got pushed back right from the start when some people, particularly I suspect full-time residents, said, well, it doesn't have to be equal, it could be equivalent or something along those lines. Equitable. Yeah, well, that's a mushy word to lawyers. And I must say the town council, when confronted with the Fifth Circuit decision, which we've discussed here, the one that does indicate that there should be equal treatment, was, well, that's the Fifth Circuit kind of thing, you know, that doesn't bind anybody. Well, of course we know that, but the question is it well reasoned? And he had no opinion on that. So the bottom line is we have, you know, we're very much in the fight. It is, as one would expect, a very strong sense against commercial, quote unquote, commercial use. Still not clear what that definition is, although the legal opinion here begins to focus. Some people have asked about that. My sense of this legal opinion is that there's a strong feeling that we can basically, you know, cut and paste and sort of come up with whatever we want. They're not. You know, all these, it would appear that the town council is comfortable with all sorts of you know, definitions and distinctions that could be made, whether from, you know, whether time, place, manner, including of course ownership and non-ownership. So with that overview, I'm sure Bill and Kathy have other thoughts that they'd like to express.
I agree with what Peter has said. I'd add a couple of comments. First of all, I think it's clear that we're going to be heading toward zoning changes, proposed zoning changes. I don't see any way to avoid that. And second, the 800-pound gorilla in the room is the Act Now position that they're being discriminated against because people feel that they shouldn't be allowed to submit a competing article. And I'm no fan of Act Now, but frankly, that troubles me. And I would hate to see the working group get bogged down in a fight with the Lindner crowd over who can express what opinion. And I think she's got a decent argument that people should be able to submit an article they want at the town meeting. Them's my thoughts.
Okay, I agree. We didn't get very far. There's all this press out there. I think the agreement that 8 out of the 9 members were to not support anything outside the meeting, not trash each other in the public, all that makes sense. I do happen to know that there's going to be a citizens article submitted. Let me see if I can pull up what I know about this.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I have, there's going to be here we go, a citizens article. I'm sure that Act Now will submit one.
Yeah.
Just so I think we can all agree on that. And it will probably protect the year-round residents more than the people like us. But what I have heard is that there's a citizens article going to come out from not from Act Now, just from a citizen that is going to basically put a stopgap out there. One of the biggest issues is, sort of do we get anything out there, kind of a zoning change out there, so that there is something, let's say Act Now puts out an article and it is too restrictive. Is there any other choice? Because if we don't have one from the working group, then, a lot of people, I think, temperature-wise are mad at the town. Town didn't take action, town didn't do the right thing, town didn't, whatever. People are mad at the town. So anything coming out from the town is in trouble. And then we are now associated with the town. We're part of the town. So, we have to move as fast as we can. It's already out there that, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so it's already out there that we don't know if we'll be able to pull something together in time for town meeting. With the timeline, we really would have to have something in writing to go through the process for approval. We'd have to have something done in the middle of December, so that it can get through the deadline that is in January. So the likelihood that there'll be citizens warrants articles out there and nothing from the town, that's not a good situation. People are like, we don't want to wait, we want it now. But I think the group feels we need to do this right. We need to we're bound to come up with a zoning article or whatever we do based on data, and we don't have the data we've asked for yet. I think the data presentation was very interesting that Granicus put together, but it's incomplete. They only have the online platforms. They don't have the real estate data. Real estate people will give it to the town, but they have to ask for it. So that was part of what I sent in a big long list of, I know the town has this and Granicus needs to have it and add it into the rest of the data so that we have at least something that we can start with. So that's one thing, but I just want to give you a little heads up on what I heard. Someone told me that they were submitting a citizens article, and that will be out in the next 2 weeks. And it's very, very simple. It's basically a stopgap to try to put this whole lawsuit thing on hold or get that off the table as a threat, which is what happens right now. There's that one lawsuit that's in the land court right now, and there are 2 more that have gone through the zoning board of appeals and had, it's the same exact point. This is a commercial use, therefore it's not allowed, and therefore you have to shut it down. So there's 2 more, one on Delaney Road and I think another one in Monomoy, that the neighbors are filing the same exact complaint. Except one of them is not a noise one, it's parking or something like that. So what I have heard that a citizen will submit is that it's very simple, that there's definitions, and it's interesting to see that the definitions, for example, the definition of owner occupied from a federal point of view, when you take census data, is 6 months or more. You live in that home, it's owner occupied. Nantucket has a different definition, and their definition is 3 months or more. So they actually accommodate seasonal people a little bit more. So what this person is planning to submit will change the definition of commercial, because commercial is another thing that you define in your town, and it's different everywhere. So Nantucket is free to define it however they please. So right now, I think that what I've heard is that the definition of commercial right now in the zoning bylaw is as in a trade, occupation, or business, including a transient residential facility, but excluding governmental, religious, or private residential uses. That's how it's stated now. This person told me that they plan to say, as in a trade, occupation, or business, including a transient residential facility, but excluding governmental, religious, or private residential uses, such as the rental of dwelling units. So any kind of rental of a dwelling unit would be defined as not commercial. So that, if you change that definition, now you've taken that off the table. And then the other change is really just to allow, specifically allow the rental of rooms within an owner-occupied building as an accessory use. Right now, accessory use, which is what short-term rentals are considered to be by the town, it says the definition is, in addition to the principal building structures or uses permitted in a district, there shall be allowed in that district as accessory uses such activities as are subordinate and customarily incident to such uses, included but not limited to the rental of rooms within an owner-occupied dwelling unit. So that would protect people who rent just rooms in their house and not the whole dwelling. So that is basically going to be out there. I think it accomplishes what Article 42 would have. It basically codifies what the town is doing, but it protects the people who are being sued now. So that's just out there for your in your head, just to give you an idea of what you're probably going to see, something like that come out.
And of course, that has to be submitted by town residents with at least 10 signatures, right?
Correct. Yes. So it is in that process right now, and you'll see it.
Interesting.
I mean, it's very frustrating. Okay, I'm sorry. Don.
So I think that, the idea is the big fear was that nobody wants to just blanket permit them, and this would be a zoning change, and this would be saying that they're permitted everywhere. But no matter what we do, or no matter what the short-term rental work group does, existing short-term rentals will be grandfathered because it's a zoning law, and that's the way zoning works. But
it requires 2/3. The difference that's very significant
Yes.
is the zoning bylaw, a zoning change requires 2/3 vote at town meeting, which is a lot.
right,
As opposed to
It's a
a
lot.
general bylaw, which only requires majority. And a bylaw could, and I would expect any bylaw would propose grandfathering. I suspect that will
but
be.
but a general bylaw, I think what council said was a general bylaw cannot do that.
No, it says here, if you look, it says here, a general bylaw, on the other hand, has no grandfathering protection unless the bylaw expressly provides for such protection. So
Right.
You could put that in there.
Right. So one of the things that we could do is we could say, we could propose as a working group that there be a cap on them, or that you can't start a new one unless you've owned the house for X period of time. But I don't know if you feel the same as I do. I think that that most people are really rabidly against the fear of, although we don't necessarily see huge evidence of it, it's certainly a fear, and it's certainly a real fear of commercial. So that one article I just sent out, which is, fractional ownership, or is what they're calling it. It's a timeshare. I don't care what you say. That's the kind of thing where they don't want coming in. So traditional short-term rentals, I think, is okay with everybody. If you realize, for example, that you can already stop the bad actors, because once this new Article 39 goes in, you call and complain about a short-term rental, the town must act on it, and then you will not get your application renewed next year if you haven't remedied that. So there's already a way to shut down the bad actors that are out there, and there are bad actors, any kind. But I think the way the the short-term rental work group, if we can find a way to identify those, outside Picasso companies and so forth that are coming in here and doing these kinds of rentals, that would, if we did that along with protecting the rights, which is what the citizen article might do, that may help, as long as that, and I think the short-term rental group really probably should be crafting a message, probably, whatever we decide to do, we need to get it out there so people understand it and it's simple. I think, it's just, it was too complicated last year.
Yeah. Don, you had a comment?
I just want to be clarifying something. You gave a definition of owner occupied dwelling. But when a renter comes in, does the owner have to be there?
No,
Is that in the definition somewhere?
the definition of owner occupied, I didn't read it, but I can read it now. It's right here. Because I was surprised to see it. I didn't realize that was different. Owner occupied says the primary residence or temporary parentheses seasonal resident of a person or persons or the individual beneficiaries of a legal entity that holds title to the property, where such persons are physically present and living within dwelling units on said property for at least 3 months each calendar year. Properties owned by corporations and the like, time-sharing interval dwelling units, or where all units are made available for rent do not qualify as owner occupied.
Okay, so let me just go back, because I had the same question,
Oh, it
similar
didn't-
question to Don's. You finished, Don? I didn't want to interrupt you.
Well, I was just thinking, it didn't say anything about when you rent it, that you have to be there or not. I didn't hear it.
No.
I didn't hear it in the definition.
So let me go back, because I think you have a good question, but let me sort of phrase it differently, because I want to understand this package that Kathy has just delivered. Let me start here. The short-term renting of a house is considered to be an accessory use. That's sort of principle number one. Where does this owner occupied definition fit into that use? In other words, in order for a short-term rental to be an accessory use, does the house that is being rented have to be owner occupied under the current definition?
No. No, it doesn't. It just has to be, it doesn't have to be anything. The whole term of short-term rental is a brand new term. It was never put into zoning because it wasn't a concept. It was just something people did. So it didn't have a name. So it's never been in zoning in any form. The word short-term rental did not get into zoning. It still is not in zoning. It's in Article 39, which is the general bylaw, but that term is not defined anywhere.
Okay, so then I'm totally confused then, because what is the accessory use is defined as what an accessory use is what?
In other words,
Talking about is
the home is a residential use means the home is a residence. People live in it.
right.
And that can be that it's rented out to somebody. And in other words, if from the federal point of view, if you are owner occupied, that means that it counts as owner occupied by the federal definition. If you rent your house year round, there's someone in that house for more than 6 months of the year. Therefore, it's considered to be owner occupied by the federal government. So that's when they take census data, that's what they say. When they come and knock on your door April 1st and they say, are you living here? The renter answers and says yes. So that counts as an owner occupied home. Or if an owner is living there for 6 months of the year, that counts as owner occupied from a federal point of view. It doesn't, the town's definition is slightly different. And so what they're doing, they've always defined that as an owner occupied home if you live there, if someone's living there for 3 months of the year. That's not a new definition. That's Nantucket's definition, which is different.
So I'm not,
And you,
yeah.
but you
continue.
don't, it's a residence. Anything that's in a residential area has to be used as a residence. You can't take your house where you live and, you know, do a business like Matt Fees anymore. He's grandfathered in, but you can't do that. It has to be primarily used as a residence. And Nantucket has always considered renting a home. It's still a residence as far as they're concerned. People still live there. That's its purpose. So therefore, it's never been considered commercial. And by using these different, defining commercial to exclude that, just makes it more specific. That's the idea.
Go ahead, Don.
The problem then becomes buildings already built. And I think it's going to be very difficult to try to get things together to try to regulate what's already been there.
It's grandfather them in. They're gonna, I mean, I think you're gonna see a grandfather position here. no matter
Well,
what.
in that case, now what we should be talking about is new buildings, new property being put in. Like for instance, this Picasso place, somebody approved what they were doing.
No, they didn't. The town
No.
disapproved it.
After the fact, after it was built.
Yeah, but they built a residence. They built a
Yeah,
7-bedroom
they never
home.
they never submitted how they were going to sell the property. They just built a property like anybody else and never had to disclose the use, so to speak. Now they're disclosing that in their documents to their potential purchasers, and people on island have learned about it. They take the position, by the way, and I have to study it. I have not had a chance to really take a look at it, but their material does distinguish between a what do you call it, a
Timeshare.
Timeshare,
timeshare and a
fractional ownership.
fractional ownership. Yeah. And my sense is that there's an equity, because it's an equity play. I think fractional ownership is an equity ownership as opposed to a timeshare, which is not.
Right.
Okay. And they have, I do know, I happened to have, out of the blue, I had lunch with somebody this week who is an early investor in Picasso. It just came up. And I didn't say anything about, I just sort of picked their brain a little bit, and they have, believe me, they have the capacity to have very strong and very good legal counsel. So I'm sure they've looked at this issue. But we need to take, so I would be very careful about saying it's an automatic, the same thing. I mean, it's I think the problem with it, I think the issue is going to be with that, and as it is with some of these other, is there on-site local control, management, what have you. That's the ultimate issue. And why, if there is, why is that different than anybody else renting out, 4 or 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, 8 times a year, right? I mean, it's the short-term rental is no different, arguably, than a timeshare, in the sense that you get each person gets 8 week. There's a week, 8 weeks, and except unless it's a run by somebody who's never, who's not there, is not present.
What's the difference between a timeshare and a fractional ownership?
I think, and again, Kathy, I haven't studied it, but I believe that a fractional ownership is an equity. As you own a share, an equitable share, and that when it's sold, you share in the profits of that sale. You are an owner. Okay.
Okay.
Whereas a timeshare, you rent. It's like having a hotel room for a certain period, certain number of days. Okay. You don't own the hotel, you don't own the room, but you have a right under a timeshare to a certain amount of time in that hotel room.
Okay. I was confused because we have a timeshare at Smuggler's Notch in Vermont, and I have a deed, and I pay direct
Well, you
property
may have an equity.
taxes.
It may be an equity. It depends how it's depends how it's written, whether you have an equitable interest. You may have.
Yeah, so I think the way I think of it, and I only started thinking when I saw the article yesterday, isn't it sort of the difference between a co-op and a condo? in a co-op, you own a share in the corporation that owns the building, and then you have a lease, 100-year lease or something from the co-op to occupy a certain unit in that building. And in a condo, you own a divided portion of the building and some undivided portion of all the hallways and all the rest of it as in fee simple. I don't know if that's an exact parallel, but it must be pretty close. I spoke with somebody who actually seems to have a fractional ownership in a boat. And the way they do it, they all own the boat. But in order to use it, you pay a fee to the other owners, and whoever bids the highest amount for whatever time they want, gets to use it during that time. I don't know how the time is divided in this fractional ownership with planes. I know fractional owners, you own a fraction of the plane, you pay to management and all the rest of it, and then you get a right to X number of hours a year of use. And when those hours are is, apportioned in some different way. But these are all interesting issues, and but I think they are going to, fortunately or unfortunately, sort of cast a shadow or a light on this whole Strog thing, because it's either going to be a way around it, or it's going to be a reason not to do it in a certain way or whatever.
Well, the other thing, I think, going back to the beginning here, I do think the town has really messed this up, because the timing is such that we are, and that's what makes it so frustrating. We're spinning our wheels. There's no way we're going to come out with anything in time for to submit something to the town. The only thing that we could possibly happen is that by the time of the town meeting, in other words, by the first weekend of May, or whenever the town meeting is, we will have a position which we can express. But so there will be a sense of the meeting that the town is either for or against it, kind of thing, or at least this committee is for or against it. But we will have nothing to propose, and that's and so all the focus is going to be on the propositions that are actually before the town meeting, being presented to the town meeting. And so it's a bit of a, I don't know, for those of us who are involved, I think anyway, it's a bit of a waste of time is too strong, but frustrating to say the least.
So here's a suggestion, and then Don, I'll get to you. The certain kinds of amendments are allowed at town meeting, and that's a whole nother murky process as to how much amending you can do and all the rest of it. And I think that may be either a town parliamentarian or the what's the fancy name for the person?
Moderator.
The moderator. The moderator is either prerogative or what have you. It may be because of what is happening that everybody's here sort of treading water while other people are actually doing something. That there may be a strategy where there is some sort of warrant that can be put in that is kind of empty, but that can be filled in by amendment, allowable amendment at or before the town meeting, in order to, have a strong position. It seems to me that the history of this issue at town meeting has not been very good for Act Now. They've been voted down twice, essentially, and the town meeting, either because there was a coalition, or I'm not sure exactly how the Strog came about at the town meeting, but the last town meeting said, we want some thoughtful people to get together and try to put something together that we might all agree upon. And we certainly have two thoughtful people, and three, including Kathy, who are involved in this process. And so I just find that blaming the town, the town maybe could have gotten this group together more quickly, but I think with great difficulty.
Well, could we also then I'm sorry, Don, you're next. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, Peter just sort of made my point. I think we have to stay away from blaming the town. I mean, times were different when all these things were put together, and I'm sure they thought that they were doing the right thing at the time and could not anticipate the future of what would happen.
No, I think, I mean, let me just be clear. The only thing I'm blaming the town on is it took them 6 months effectively to come up with a working group.
Well,
That's inexcusable. And there's no, you know, and then they diddled around, you know, I mean, it just, that's the problem. I mean, they didn't appoint us until the end of, you know, until October effectively, and they knew about this back in May. So.
I
Well,
was just wondering if we could, strategy wise, back to Peter's, is, we could propose, the straw could propose an amendment to one of the warrants that gets put out there, right? So let's
No.
say,
We
No?
can't, we can't,
oh, can't,
we can't speak at a meeting and we can't.
no,
put
no,
something at
no,
that meeting.
the STR working group can't either.
Oh, the
Is that
SD
right?
Yes, the R can do it, yeah,
That's what I meant, yes,
but not the committee.
yes.
Yeah.
Just,
Hey,
Well,
Bill,
Yeah, is there a second possible outcome here? One obviously is an amendment, and as you say, that's a murky process. But there was, I think, some thought given to the working group coming up with an article and publicize what it is, explain it and everything else, and say, this is what we would come up with if we had been able to get it in time. But now that you see what it is, why don't we start a movement, or however you do it, for a special town meeting, which I think could take place in the fall.
yes,
it'd be one of those two strategies to that I think that the STROG itself ought to be considering now, you know, given the way the playing field is developing. And, you know, this would be like halftime and figure out, well, okay, what do we do now? Because we're not going to have a proposal, you know, for the second half. We need to do something. And you know, maybe something can be done or can't be done. Gary?
Bill, I think that's a great idea. And I know that it came up early in some of the working group sessions when they realized they couldn't get it done in time for this particular meeting, but to have a special meeting easily done, should be done. And maybe if you got enough people if we got enough people to agree that if we come up with something that seems to make sense and we let everybody know and we push for for an additional town meeting, a special town meeting for that, maybe that's the way to avoid hysteria. By the way, that, you know, the town did come up with a good solution, which we endorsed, which was basically, at least for now, short-term rentals are okay. We're going to put the regulation in 42, and then we'll develop regulations that are necessary to control whatever the problems are. So the town really did come up with that. And of course, everyone got hysterical, like Matt Fee, who thinks we're going to open the floodgates, even though there are no gates. Everybody can rent now anyway. So, but I have some questions. Peter, the first question I have is when the group met with town council, were you there?
Yes.
You were there. So you posed the questions for the
I was
people in the group.
Yes,
And
yes.
by the way, I did read the entire memo from the council, and I recommend that all of us take a good look at that. It's very interesting. There's some stuff in there that I didn't understand. So one of the questions I always had is, as you know, I've been saying, maybe I've been wrong all along. I've been saying all along that it is bedrock principle of zoning law, right? Hornbook rule, right? That zoning can only regulate usage, not the entities. And I'm looking at those opinions at town council, and they're differing with that, and I don't understand that. Now, even if I'm correct in that assumption that zoning can only regulate usage, I also understand that they can get around that by making a general bylaw, in which case they can do differentiation. But I certainly am confused looking at that legal opinion that seems to say under the zoning law, you know, there are certain, they can regulate entities. And that's very, very surprising to me. By the way, the fact that the Picasso thing has occurred may take a little pressure off the short-term rental problem, because people are now paralyzed about thinking about that. But it gets back down to one of the early issues that you folks raised properly, which is what is the problem we're trying to face, you know? And at one of the last sessions, I remember, I think what Dave Iverson was saying, we don't have a big noise problem, you know, when you look at all the complaints that went to the police department and everybody else. Because that's the reason people use to say we need to regulate short-term rentals. But in fact, the data does not support the fact that it's a significant problem on the island. So here they are, but they use it. All the people trying to stop short-term rentals keep talking about the news and the noise and disruption and you know, a handful of instances, and it ain't.
Well, the other thing, Gary, they use, which we've been hearing about, is the supposed tie-in to moderate income housing, you know, affordable housing. And, you know, that still has yet to be established. There's been a lot of discussion about that. We haven't seen any evidence, you know, some people have a theory, but there's been no evidence necessarily to support it. There's, I mean, you know, again, what I'm seeing, again, just as an observer here, as I've listened to all, it is a, you know, the Monomoy thing was very evident, I think, you know, there is the boogeyman of our land values are going to go down. If there's somebody in the neighborhood who has a house that can be rented, you know, that's being rented out to people who don't necessarily live there. And there's this, you know, and then so everybody, that's the scare. That's the scare. You know, it carries, you know, everybody talks about, you know, the big corporation, you know, we keep hearing that word, and yet it's not there right now. You know, even the quote unquote corporation that's there is owned by local people. So
I just so you know, many of the questions that were in the legal opinion were my questions, because I submitted them in writing, so I know they're mine. Some of them were just taken from people's discussions during the meeting and then answered. So a lot of those questions I had put in.
We put in specifically, the one we put in was the one with where it says see answer 3, which was, you know, we specifically asked, you know, is there a difference? Is there a difference?
Yeah, so I went to that, and I didn't went. I tuned into that meeting, and pretty much saw probably 90% of it, and I thought it was a very good meeting. First of all, I think that one of the things that we ought to do today is for everybody that has the interest to go back and read these legal questions and answers, and send to Peter and Bill, or you can copy other people. I'm not sure exactly where the public meeting law starts and ends on this, but you can, as individuals interested in this issue, indicate what you think needs to be further clarified, you know, given the questions that have been asked and answered. Gary, you know, brought up the issue of the limits of zoning laws versus general bylaws that apparently is not as clear and crisp as one would hope. And so that would be one takeaway from this meeting that I think that Peter and Bill could take, because the next meeting and the first meeting objective of the next meeting, which is in 3 days, November 8th, is clarify legal questions. And so I agree with that. And maybe this is also an opportunity. I hate to push our luck on this Fifth Circuit thing, because when initially it was mentioned, I think twice in that legal meeting, and initially the town council, John DeGiorgio, brought it up quite a bit more affirmatively than then he explained it a little bit more later by saying it's not binding on the First Circuit. Nobody can tell where they go, but I think that the point that you make, Peter, is, well, you know, what is the what is the sort of critical holding in here, and why wouldn't it be, or wouldn't you expect, or something like that? I must say that I was very surprised by the holding by the Fifth Circuit, because I had either correctly or mistakenly believed that there was no discrimination in the following way. That Massachusetts residents who are not Nantucket residents, like you're living in Boston and your name is Copley, and leaving the commercial aspect out of it, but you are a non-resident but have a house and, let's say, rent it out mostly as a short-term rental on Nantucket. So Massachusetts, in that situation, a rule that basically said you had to be a Nantucket resident in order to engage in short-term rentals would discriminate against other Massachusetts residents the same way it discriminates against Washington, D.C. residents. And I thought under that sort of guise, there really was not a discrimination that is, it's Massachusetts first, because Nantucket is Massachusetts. Any power it has comes from the state of Massachusetts, and here it is, Massachusetts discriminating against its own residents based on their legislation, and that's no different than non-residents. I'm hard to articulate that, but
I think the Fifth Circuit opinion, I mean, the Fifth Circuit opinion was people who didn't live in New Orleans. I mean, could live anywhere. I mean, I think the whole interstate commerce issue, I mean, is it affecting adversely interstate commerce? And then that crazy clause, whatever it is, the silent whatever clause of the it gets pretty complicated. But the other thing I find difficult to understand, and I need to get clarification on it. The Massachusetts Land Bank, Land Court, which they keep referring to, I don't think it has any precedential value. I think only the Superior Court has presidential value, and that's not so that's unclear to me. But I don't think so. The cases that are citing the Land Court, which they freely act now freely does, do not have any precedential value.
But isn't Stiller, and it's Stiller
Yeah.
that isn't the Land Court, isn't it a higher court?
I don't know. I thought it was a Land Court, but maybe it is. I don't know.
I've got it here. It's Stiller. It's Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts is Stiller. And
Okay.
So the reason that Stiller doesn't have precedential value in Nantucket is that is the last footnote in the opinion, which it basically says it depends, that the outcome would depend on what the practices have heretofore been in whatever the jurisdiction is within the state of Massachusetts. And
Originalism.
it's
Well,
footnote
yeah.
19. Footnote
Because
19. Says
goes back to this, it goes back to what does Nantucket zoning say? You can't take the zoning from another town and apply it to Nantucket.
Yeah, because we hasten to add, however, that a different result may obtain in other circumstances, depending upon, for example, the specifics of the zoning bylaws of the city or town, including what types of additional uses are permitted, if any, as well as what is considered a customary accessory use in a particular community. So that's what makes it non-precedential, unless you can, whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think that, number one, we need to identify those legal questions that may be helpful to our position that need to be further strengthened or clarified. Don?
Listening to the lawyers here, which I am not, I can see there's no clarity.
Yeah.
Therefore, I think when any proposal is made, it should have a provisional basis. That somebody has to look and see how this thing is working at a time set and meet again to decide whether it is doing what they thought it would or it is not. Because this is one of the problems when laws are made. They're not reviewed to see whether they're really doing the job they expect. And when I look at this, whatever it is, timeshare or anything versus, what would happen? Say, they're told you can't do this. So now they have a property. So what do? They'll sell it. And to someone and do what they wanted to do in the first place and be a management company. You know, they would be responsible for managing the building. So they'll get around it one way or another. And the
They may not
problem
get as
is-
much money for the sale because obviously, if
But
you
they'll
can-
get enough.
Yeah.
They'll get enough. It'll be profitable.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
maybe.
I think that raises a different question, and that is, there are two kinds of grandfathering, right? Or maybe there's only one kind, but it's the extent to which the grandfathering has effect. So for example, if I am engaged in the short-term rental business, and grandfathering protects me so that I continue to do it, does the grandfathering also mean that I can now sell my property to somebody else who wants to do the same thing, or does it end with my ownership? And that are two very different issues, and they have different market consequences.
Well, therefore, that's why I think it needs to be reviewed after a certain period of time to see what actually happens.
Right.
The other thing is that characterizing people who would either as part-time owners or as renters are capable of any worse behavior than anybody else who lives there, I think is unfair. I mean, this thing about preventing noise or loud parties or anything like that, anybody who lives there can do the same, and I think that should be struck from any kind of agreement that they take. That thing should pertain to anybody, whether they live there over a weekend or, you know, they're a full-time resident. They should not be disturbing the peace in a major way. So I think it's a human being kind of regulation, not a building kind of regulation.
Okay, I've got Kathy and then Gary in the queue after Don.
Real quick, just speaking to what Don says, so one of the questions I did ask the legal counsel was, could there be a sunset clause in whatever the short-term rental working group comes up with? So that goes to giving a time to, we could just say, let's let the rentals be the way they are until we come up with our proposal for the town, let's say in the fall, and just make it legal now for the next 6 months or a year by putting a sunset clause on something that says it's permitted for now. And we can also use it, like you said, let's say when we come forward, say, we're going to try this out for a certain period of time and see how it works, because you never know what the consequences are going to be. We can look at other towns who've put regulations in, and maybe they're tourist towns, but maybe they're different than Nantucket. So you can't know the dynamics there. And then I think the other thing, going back to the very beginning, when we were talking about the goals of the short-term rental working group, and they're basically motherhood and apple pie. I don't know if you'd agree with that, Peter, but it's like, we want to preserve our neighborhoods and stop traffic. I mean, it's just, let's return Nantucket to the 70s, and the short-term rental work group is responsible for that. I mean, it's absurd. That part bothers me, because we can't succeed. Anyway,
It goes
I'm
back
done.
to the whole issue of it goes back to the whole position of what has caused the overcrowding. I mean, what is it that's caused us not to be the Nantucket of the 70s? And I don't think it's STRs in and of themselves. I think there's a lot of reasons.
Yeah, but before we get to Gary, I think first of all, I like apple pie. And secondly, I think that in looking at the agenda for the next STROG meeting, the last meeting objective is discuss next steps. And maybe, Peter, that's an opportunity to suggest the next step is again to focus on what the problem is. And Gary, go ahead.
So in answer to the last comment, what the problem is. I've already made my conclusion, okay? And the problem that I have with it is that when you listen to the voice coming out of the short-term working group, except for some of us good guys and gals, they're all convinced it's all the short-term rentals.
You're being recorded.
What I know, and I'm delighted that there's starting to be a little conversation in Nantucket about the fact is, the real problem is the land bank is taking 50% of the island out of use. And they're continuing. And, you know, when I see they spent this year about 42 million of the 50 that they earned last year, buying all of these properties. There was an article in one of these things talking about the fact that the land bank is killing the island because it's not just taking land away from possible development for future growth, it's also taking people off the property off the tax rolls. And when I think about the fact that the land bank has enormous amount of land that is now protected, I think, you know, if I was czar of the universe, I'd say, okay, land bank, from now on, you still collect your 2%, but that's not going to be used to add additional protected land. It's going to be used to develop the land that is already controlled by you. And you can use some of it for affordable housing. You can build new recreation fields. You know, we need another 9 holes for a comet. There's lots of stuff that can be done. It should be done with all of the money you're earning. Don't keep taking property and taking it out of use anymore, because it's squeezing everybody else on the island. And so that's the real problem, in my view, is that so much of the island has been conserved and is continuing to be taken out of use. That's what's causing all of the high prices. And that's what's causing a lot of the locals to have no place to live. Now, I don't think if you guys raise that at the meeting, they'll say, what? You guys are against the land bank? You know, that's motherhood. Talk about apple pie. But in my view, that's the problem. The problem is we have limited amount of land for use for housing and development, and it keeps getting smaller. And that's what's causing the high prices, which are driving the locals out of town or preventing them from being able to afford housing. And I don't know how we can deal with that. Maybe it's something that our committee has to start pushing. I did
Bill
see.
Sherman. Bill Sherman is next.
Okay.
I'd like to offer a counter to that view. Actually, in my mind, the land bank is what's saving the island from itself. If you made any large fraction of the land bank holdings available for development, more homes, you'd increase the population, you'd increase the traffic congestion, you'd increase all the negatives that we have a hard time dealing with, other than by constraining the availability of buildable land. Then to add just a comment from an earlier remark, I believe that grandfathering runs with the property unless it's specified as specific to the then owner of the property.
Thank you. That certainly helps me with my clarification. Maybe I will add to my, what is the problem thing, and I don't think it's any one thing, but I think there's a way to define the problem and then figure out what causes it. And I think there are too many beds on the island, and there is demand. There's demand for these beds. People want to come to the island and either own or visit and rent. There are too many planes coming to the island, too many boats coming to the island. The island is a victim of its own success, and part of that success happens to be all the land that's preserved by the land bank and makes it a more enjoyable place to live in and visit. And part of that success is all the money that people have invested in their houses to make them very, very attractive to other people and renters and to guests. How do you, there was an article in, I don't know, whether it was the Times or one of the papers this week about the Netherlands and how the density in the Netherlands is getting to the point where they can't have any more people. And it just may be that we have the same, it's a density issue in Nantucket. Given the infrastructure, given the land mass there, it may be that we have to regulate density.
But
And
it's only for a couple of weeks. When you really think about it, we're talking about, right now, in the September, October, beautiful time of the year, we don't have a problem. May, June, we don't have a problem. Arguably July and August, we have that problem. So can you limit it to that period of time?
But the answer is obviously yes. Somebody needs to come up with a scheme, and maybe that's what you guys need to do.
Well, that may well be right, and that's when you maybe that's when you allot a certain, like like a taxi cab. You get there's only a certain number of licenses or medallions that are available during the high season, right? And you have a lottery. I mean, there are all sorts of crazy ways you could do it.
Bill Sherman.
I liken the problem we face regarding STRs and now the fractional ownership that's coming from this other outfit. It's a little bit like how we've dealt in Nantucket with the problem of franchise retail outlets. We've excluded them, and we think we've done rightly. It's not because you can automatically know, looking at a store, whether you like it because it's locally owned or you don't like it because it's a franchise. But in the case of residential use, I think we sort of intrinsically or intuitively understand there's an increased intensity of use with timeshares, with fractional ownership, with short-term rentals. And that intensity of use may or may not cause more noise or other specific problems, but it's something that we intuitively recoil from, at least some of us do. It's not easy to figure out how properly to regulate it. And certainly grandfathering is one way to ease the transition from what we have to what we want in the long term.
Yeah, I think that you've coined a phrase that resonates with me, and that is intensity of use. This is an intensity of use problem, and how, and the R word is a dirty word, right? Regulation. How do we regulate that, or how do we? If indeed there's agreement in this group that there is an intensity of use problem, how do we basically help this strong group identify that as the problem and come to some reasonable solutions that does not nick any one group too badly? And I think I have a lot of sympathy for people who need to rent to stay, and I don't want to see that ability diminished, because I think that also adds to the breadth of kinds of people on the island and the overall health and diversity on the island. So how do we help, if indeed intensity of use during, let's say, 3 months is the big problem, and maybe it's just that simply defined without pointing any fingers. We just know there are too many. What's that? The rent's too damn much, or whatever. Too many damn people on the island during a period of time. And it may not be actually 3 months. It could be, 2.5 months or something. But how do we get that message across, if that's our message, in an agreeable fashion, and find the motherhood and apple pie that everybody can accept, and get that down to a measurable impact on the island?
Just one thing I wanted to, this is again anecdotal, but I think it'll come out when the real estate folks put their numbers in. It came out in the Granicus data that the actual short use of homes as short-term rentals has dropped. And that may be COVID related, it may come right back, but 30% fewer short-term rental, active short-term rental homes are in the real estate bucket than there used to be. So what's happening in some cases is that people are using their homes a lot more, or they're buying the sales that are going to 80%, 75, 80% of the new sales go to seasonal owners, not year-round people. That's no surprise. It's been that way forever, I think. But maybe people are using their own homes more, meaning it's more intensity of use of all of the services as well. And so that needs to be considered too. Maybe it'll do nothing to limit people's short-term rentals, because people are going to, and everybody has the right to use their home more. So it's going to be a tough one, I think.
I don't think it's that tough, Kathy, because I tend to think that if there's one thing that everybody could agree upon, it is that you have a right to use your own home.
Oh, yeah.
And if we think that the intensity of use stems from, too many homes, well, then the regulatory answer there is stop building more homes. There's a regulatory answer to each one of these problems, but some different ox is gored with each answer.
Right, like the lady that sold that home to Picasso she wanted it to be bought by a year-rounder, but she could have accepted a lower bid, but no one's going to do that. So I don't know how it's just so hard to know what to do.
Factor, right? When I bought my house many years ago now, and I saw that land bank tax, which basically that's a tax, right? I said, I was a little bit shocked, and I said, wait a minute, this is gonna be the best tax I ever paid, because I'm going to get this all back and more, because this becomes like a tontine, last man standing, so long as there's still demand, has the only game in town. So
True.
However, when we talk about possible regulation of the high season, it would never ever pass a town meeting. I'll tell you why, because if you talk to all of the merchants, they will all tell you the same thing. The money they make in 3 months is 10 times as much as they make the entire rest of the year. So I can't imagine
this under your watchful eye.
I can't imagine proper even good regulation, whatever it is, they're going to start screaming. They say, wait a second, that carries us all those lousy months when no one's here.
Right.
So how could you possibly limit the amount of people here?
but we're talking about growth in demand. We're not talking about smushing demand. At the very least, how do you stop this from getting worse? That would be, what is the problem? Then, number one, any solution should at least stop it from getting worse. And that just means that maybe there's not a lot of business expansion, but the people that are here and can sell their businesses and continue to operate them, they ought to make out like bandits. Convincing people of that fact, and regulating in a way that doesn't become the regulator doesn't become captured, and certain people benefit more than others. That's always a difficult question. But I see your point, Gary. But I think that that the people that are there, the complaint you're hearing these days, and this may be pandemic related, is they can't get enough people to serve the market that's already there, and they're limited in that way.
Hopefully that's coming back with the H1s, the increase in H1s for this season. So hopefully they'll have more help.
And that means we need more housing, seasonal housing, and so on and so forth. Go ahead, Don.
As we talk about this, every time we think about the short-term rentals, it leads on to other aspects of the climate in Nantucket. So one of the things, besides a provisional time period to whatever the short-term rental group is doing, they should say, we need a overall island planning to be done, to look into the future, how everything is going to work together for the best. And I always see plans being made piecemeal. You know, take care of this little problem, then take care of that little problem. And it's only an island of 3 by 4 miles. So why not do it for the whole island? Like I was just wondering in mine, and I can see pros and cons. Should all the activity be in downtown Nantucket? Should there be another spot built that people would like to go to besides downtown, so things are spread out a bit more? But
Well,
I don't know.
Yeah, that's a-
I'm not a planner, so I think people who have expertise in this area are the ones to do it. I mean, all we can do is suggest. I don't think we can have definitive answers.
Well, I think there's a planning board already, and it may be that our problem is it's not doing a good enough job. And I think there's at the last town meeting, there was somebody suggesting there ought to be some sort of super planning board. And she was voted out of the hall, I think.
Hillary.
Yeah.
Hillary, yes, yeah. But you're absolutely right, Don, that this is a planning issue. But I think we're not going to solve all those problems. But I do think that and I would like to sort of bring this to a close if everybody's sort of let their steam out on the issue, but that we should be sending to Peter and Bill. Take those legal questions, print them out, maybe mark them up a little bit, and give them your best view of what needs to be clarified, added, whatever, so that they can respond at this meeting on Tuesday. I also think that we ought to be thinking about, in addition to our message right now, which has been consistent, that we not be discriminated against, that our contribution is to help define the problem at the very least. And I kind of like this, what I would call seasonal intensity of use is the major problem. I don't know about if everybody else looks at it that way or not, but if something's simple and catchy, and might actually, people may first think they understand it, and they'll have a different definition of what that means. But it seems to me it could begin to, like a snowball, start forming the snowball. Who knows?
That presumes that there's a lot of rationality in this group. Thus far, it's hasn't been evident.
We're depending on you to
Well,
become
yeah,
the
my advocacy. I
rationality.
thought I had pretty good advocacy skills, but I got to tell you, it's not so easy with this group.
Yeah. And
One
so-
thing I think that based on what Bill's idea, which I still like, is that at your next meeting, I think you ought to ask the moderator, whoever running it, is to have the group come up with the procedures necessary to have a special town meeting a few months after the regular town meeting.
There is, Gary, there is, I mean, I think that's one thing that there seems to be support for. I mean, there was extra, so I think that has a fairly good shot. I think it's maybe a little premature to lock that in, but it's certainly something that's worth repeating and repeating and repeating, so that
Right, once people start thinking about, okay, we
Right.
will have something, we
Right.
don't have to worry that we get it all done by this
Exactly.
particular meeting. I think that'll be helpful.
Yep, I agree.
So let's just draw this part of the meeting to a close then. And the next agenda item is discussion of published citizens warrant articles. I think that will be more on our next agenda with this one revisited after another strong meeting or two. But I know that one of the agenda articles is, rather warrant articles that has been submitted, I believe, has to do with a change in the form of town government, which has been something close. Two of them, there are two of them now. And I think Kathy suggested maybe we could get the proponents to come and speak about that. I read an article, as you can see, I read a lot of papers now, but I read an article, I can't remember, it's in the Times or one of the papers, about would the Australia way of voting be appropriate for the United States? And just to shorthand it, it made me think of Nantucket. And apparently in Australia, everybody has to vote. If you're of voting age, it's not a matter of, showing up at the polls. You have to show up at the polls or pay a fine. And the fine is, pretty minimal, $20 or something like that. But according to the article, that tends to damp down on the extremism that you find. And that really is what I think Gary's been concerned about at the town meeting, that you have your claque and they can, last out everybody who goes home. But if you had maybe you could continue town meeting, because the people seem to want to have the town meeting, but then actually require them either in person or virtually to attend and vote. And that might solve the problem. It still would be pretty damn unwieldy, but it's just an abstract thought brought on by reading about Australia and thinking, that's not a bad way of doing things. So we have that to look at.
Don't we also? I think I saw the article in the Inky, and this this screens Gary Beller in it. This parking that we're going to get a we're going to get a parking commission.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I must say, there may be one benefit out of this short-term rental controversy, and that is we certainly have elevated our visibility. And the town, I think the town manager or whatever, I think sees us as a way to deflect issues by saying, okay, well, we got this group that quote unquote represents the non-voting taxpayers. So she's put us on that commission too now, I guess.
Yeah. So I think I shared with either all of you or most of you my exchange with the town this week. One of our critics had pointed out that we had not been obeying the quorum rules that were posted on our own website, and of course that's because the town had never changed them to bring them up to date, because they were changed at our request. And so that has all been corrected now on our website. It's now up to date. We also, Kathy, sent that in, and then finally it got done this week, yesterday, I think it was. We have 3 people who have asked to be appointed to the committee, of which 1 or 2 of them are known by virtually everybody in some way in this group, or some people in this group. And Libby said that she was having a telephone interview with one, I think either this past week or next week, and she's, amongst all of her other headaches, she's working her way through, and hopefully we'll have 3 new members of the committee.
How many slots do we have open? Because I may have another one. How many?
There's a total of 15. There's a total of 15, and we currently have there's 7 of us on.
Okay.
Lou is,
Okay. So
I don't know what Lou's
there's room for
desires
more.
are, but we probably, Lou, my guess is he's lost interest or something in the committee. So we could have another, 7 or 8.
7 or 8,
including these 3. So that would be good. And then lastly, on this parking, Libby mentioned, I did not watch the town meeting this week. I don't know whether it's this week or next week, that the parking commission is going to come up, and that she was pumping for getting a member of this committee on it. And I told her that, we probably have a good candidate with experience, and we'd be happy to fill one of those seats. And of course, I'm thinking in the background of Gary, but I haven't called him, or anybody else who has an interest in doing that if indeed a seat opens up.
It's on the agenda for Wednesday.
Yeah, for this Wednesday. Okay, good. Yeah, I'm going to be on a plane, I think, on Tuesday, so I will not be able to watch the short-term group meeting because
I'll be there.
but I, my reaction, having watched, I think, major portions of 2 meetings, is it's like, what do you call it? Anybody here go to dancing class when they were younger?
Hey, that's my problem.
Everybody it takes a while for people to actually cross the room and ask somebody to dance. And this is, I think a little bit of what's going on there at that meeting, is that people are, getting comfortable with one another, figuring out who you can trust.
It is interesting. I mean, given the given Act Now, A is a, that she is a paid, she is a paid full-time paid staffer. They are involved in lawsuits. I mean, it's, there's no, at this point anyway, no incentive, I don't think, for them to compromise much at all. Because this group is looking to compromise, but they don't have any incentive to join that effort.
Well, it's not up to them anyway. It's up to the town.
No, but that's true. But that's, then none of us, then it's not worth it for anybody to be doing it, because always, the last thing is it's always up for the, the town. So anyhow.
Well, here's I guess the question. I understand from Kathy's presentation today that it will not be Act Now actually putting in the warrant or sponsor.
One of their members will be putting it in, I suspect, right? I mean, that's how they're going to hide it. I mean, then they'll support it.
Yeah, they will step, I'm sure they will submit something. That's just my personal feeling. I don't have any evidence of that. But the other one I talked about earlier is just another citizen putting this in to protect the people who are being sued right now. At least this is a permanent thing. If it were a sunsetted thing, then it could just protect people for a while, that kind of thing. So I think there'll be at least 2 that come in for short-term rentals.
Yeah.
But how is it? Okay. The only thing I wonder, if the lawsuits are already filed, and then there's a change in the law, does that necessarily moot? I mean, depends what the change is, whether it moots anything or not.
But it'll stop you. There'll be more. There's no reason why this doesn't keep going, because people have money and they can do that.
Right.
Yeah. Well, does anybody else have, I'm just looking for the rest of, we got nobody from the public to make public comments today. Any unanticipated items that we need to discuss today? I guess we want to just
next
talk
meeting?
about next meeting. Yeah.
I would. 2 weeks. Well, if we want to meet in front of, the question is, do you want to meet before every short-term rental meeting? Because the next short-term rental meeting will be, let's take a look here. Where's my calendar? It'll be 2 weeks from the 8th. Right. So we could meet the 19th with the 19th. That would be the top. 19th would be if we want to discuss to get ready for the meeting on the 22nd.
I think that would be worthwhile. What do other people think? Should we schedule one for the 19th?
Is that about town meeting?
Sorry?
Is that about town meeting or the?
No, the short-term rental.
Not short-term rental, okay.
Yeah, why not? We can always cancel it, I guess, huh?
Well, also that'll be after we know what the citizens warrants are. They will be.
Yeah.
They
What do
will
those
be
do, Kathy?
The
What do those do?
14th. The
Okay,
14th.
good.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
So I may not be able to host that one, but it looks like it's doable by anybody now. You don't have that 2-factor authentication. They took it off. I'm going to be driving in a car back from babysitting my grandson.
Well, what I'll try to do is get a hold, is it Erica who I should get a hold of and practice or something like that?
No, you don't need to do that anymore.
You don't need,
They took out the two-factor authentication. Otherwise,
but-
I wouldn't have been able to log in today.
but still didn't you have to open the meeting and get it started?
No,
Yes,
if you-
yeah.
So I will
But
need
you
to
can
have
do it
that
yourself.
information. Yeah, yeah.
You would just do what I did, just like we used to
Yeah.
before you had all the phone calls back and forth. They took all that security out because it was ridiculous. You couldn't.
So somebody just needs to send me those instructions once again because
Yeah.
my ACNVT files are getting this
Yeah.
thick and.
Right. I'll send it to you and you can run, I'll be on the meeting. I just don't want to be hosting it from a
Okay,
car.
right, yeah, no, I'm happy to do it.
I
And
don't know if I'll be available because it's my granddaughter's birthday and I know my 7-year-old granddaughter, I know her mother's planning a party, which grandpa and grandma have to be there. So we'll see.
Yes.
I don't know what time yet.
But then we're going to put you on those other committees if you're not on the call, Gary.
Is there anything happening with the coastal resiliency that we should know? Not necessarily today, but maybe, in the future.
Well, we meet every other Tuesday. And we recently lost out on a bid. One of the big plans, one of the priorities is to try to save downtown, which is basically the ferry terminal and Easy Street, stuff like that. And so we have this kind of plan, the humongous plan to harbor the entire, put barriers up for the entire entrance to Nantucket. And there was an opportunity to bid for a grant from the state of Massachusetts, the zoning authorities. And unfortunately, we applied. We spent a lot of time coming up with the application. And unfortunately, we were not successful. We were hoping to get $200,000 or $300,000 for the beginning studies of whether we could actually put in a plan like this, which would protect the harbor the same way they have in the Netherlands, stuff like that. So we are looking for more ways to get grants. There's a certain amount of money available, both either from FEMA, from the state of Massachusetts, anywhere else we can get it. We're looking because we have 40 priorities. If you look at and Don, you talking about long range planning, the good news is that there is a wonderful long range plan, which is the Coastal Resiliency Plan, the CRP, which is on. You can look at it on the website, and it talks about what needs to be done, what's going to happen over the next 80 years between now and 2100. And we have priorities. We have 40 priorities, and the priorities are something that I felt strongly about. Unfortunately, the rest of the committee felt the same way, is we have to protect the infrastructure. What's the infrastructure? Well, it's the storage plant, which is right on the edge of the water. It's the airport, it's the ferry terminal, all of the goods, services coming to the island. That's where they come through. And so there are plans to raise the downtown street leading up to the ferry terminal. We've been meeting with the people from the Steamship Authority, and they're several years away from actually starting the work on it, but they know that in 8 or 9 years, people won't be able to get off the ferry anymore unless we raise the entire dock there and also the streets adjoining it. So, but the biggest problem we have is that everyone wants the same funding. And if you read about what's going on in Miami, right? They're getting funds. Boston getting funds. Everyone is looking, all of the municipalities that have large populations next to where the oceans are, and they're all under threat. We're all under threat. And so you're battling against municipalities that have a considerably larger population to protect and more financial interest in doing so. So that's the struggle we have, is to get the necessary funding. We have some small projects that are underway, while we're doing this. We even have a problem with our waste disposal in Nantucket, because the roads leading to our, to the waste area won't be passable in 5 years. So we're talking about whether we have to move that to another part of the island. We're looking at possible alternatives.
Well, that may all, help to moderate future intensity of use.
Right.
The,
We're almost done.
is it any true that your suggestion's been that everybody buy wellies?
Yeah.
Everybody's raising their homes. There were so many homes going up. If you go down in Brand Point,
Yeah.
if you drive, I'm not there now, but if you drive around, you will see there's a half a dozen homes are being raised as we speak. And it's like $1 million,
Yeah.
Kerry's home, which is, bought by a family we know from Texas, right? They bought the home for $17 million 4 years ago. They gutted it and they wanted to raise it, but the people that do the raising, were so busy, they couldn't do it. So they finished the house anyway, because there were some parties to have. And now this year, they're raising that entire house right on the harbor as you enter Nantucket.
How much are they raising it, Gary?
You have to raise it 8 feet. The
8
FEMA
feet.
rules are 8
Wow.
feet above sea level.
Wow.
So a lot of stuff.
I assume.
Curious what that bill is.
Well, I'm at 26 feet above sea level,
It's-
so.
It's $1 million for that. That one house is going to cost about $1 million, I think, because it's a compound. It's a compound, so.
So should we adjourn? I guess we have for the 19th, any other business that we need to take care of? I must say I've enjoyed seeing you all this morning. And do we have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
And second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Okay.
stay well, everybody.
See you in 2 weeks.
Very good.
Thanks.
Well done.